now moving into our infrastructure conversation. So at the table, we have Public Works and Zoning and Codes. And Sarah would like to have some comments first.
Yeah, I've got the summary comments for infrastructure. Public Works is in two different funds, the Road and Bridge Fund and the General Fund. Douglas County has traditionally segregated the Road and Bridge Fund because of the special city county highway tax funds received by the state of Kansas, which are gas tax funds, and then public works operations that do not directly benefit those are in the General Fund, and those include fleet operations and parks and vegetation. In the proposed budget, a fleet 1.0 FTE fleet mechanic position was added to the general fund. And now turning to the Road and Bridge Fund, it is proposed to end 2025 with a 29% fund balance in 2025. If we want to keep that under the 25% as outlined in policy, we would want to transfer $413,000 approximately out. We've talked to Public Works staff about that. And their recommendation is to transfer it to CIP. So if commissioners are supportive of that, we can prepare for that additional transfer to be included in the final budget for commissioners to consider.
Sarah, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
My recollection is that we had in recent years sort of rated CIP for other funds. Is that?
It's been a while, but
okay.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and CIP does not get the increase based off of standard assessed valuation growth. We have kept that percentage down. Right now, CIP is proposed for a 5% increase over its 2024 amount. And we're going to have a whole session on our capital and 5-year capital improvement plan on August 7th. Commissioners, I believe you're going to get your materials from that next week. I'm going to skip ahead because I had a little bit on public work on CIP. The county CIP includes road and bridges in the unincorporated area and county facilities. And then if I go back to the Road and Bridge Fund, just some contractual costs that have increased. The highway striping contract has increased as a result of increased materials and service costs. This budget maintains a transfer to equipment reserve of $625,000 for heavy equipment, heavy truck, and personal vehicles. The 2024 and 2025 replacement schedule is on page 118 of your budget report. Public Works has 57 employees and 44 of those work for the road and bridge operation. Turning to zoning and codes, building permit revenue is down this year. In 2023, it was $273,299. So far for 24, we've only received $59,622. Zoning codes is a pretty small operation. We are planning to reclassify some staff later this year to allow for more cross-training to help us in the places where zoning issues overlap with building code issues. And though Tanya Voigt and Chad Voigt are here to answer any questions you might have.
Until we have CIP, it's hard for us to kind of dig in really to Chad's budget here. Are there pieces beyond what Sarah highlighted that you would want to make sure that we are aware of?
Not very much. That was covered most of it. I will say that we looked at our gasoline, over the last several years, gas and diesel have both been tough to manage the cost on, and we're actually dropping that slightly from the 2024 budget. So trying to tighten that up just to reflect what's actually happening. So we're saving a little bit there. We do have a slight increase in temporary hire budget for parks and vegetation. We've been stealing some of their temporary labor for other crews in road and bridge and fleet. And when we looked back, we have not increased the temporary budget for the last 10 years. And so instead of asking for more budget, we've just simply stopped hiring temporary labor. So, and I didn't realize that until we kind of went through those records. So that's where that slight increase is showing.
Sorry, can you point us to that?
Yes, it's in the Parks and Vegetation budget under the general fund, and it's 58275 temporary hire.
I'll get you a page number here. Okay.
113, yep. It's a very small increase, but it was something we wanted to recognize that we do use temporary labor, and it helps us a lot with covering our operations. And I think there's a similar increase for the Road and Bridge Fund on that line item. Highway striping contracts, Sarah mentioned that we've seen increases in paint prices for 5 consecutive years, and it's gotten to the point where it's just stopping us from being able to cover the whole county in a given year. And so there's a significant increase there. It's about 10%. We did tighten up a few items here and there just to reflect reality. One example, I'm looking at page 120. Equipment rental, we just haven't been spending the full 18,000, so we dropped that to 10. So here and there, we tweak things to try to tighten up to show some reality. But other than that, everything's pretty flat. As Sarah mentioned, we have the supplemental request for fleet operations for an additional position. We can go into more detail on that if you would like to.
When was the last time there's either been a request or been added a position in fleet?
Actually, fairly recently. It was three to 4 years ago that we've done this. But what you have to remember is we took on CFD1. And that was initially, at that point, we were kind of overloaded already. So there was a recognition that it was already needed. When we had a CFD1, the understanding was we would be taking their big trucks, and that the additional adding that person was going to help us cover what we were already missing. At this point, CFD1 has increased to basically we're doing all of their vehicles, all of their pickup trucks, their field trucks, everything. That is reflected on the revenue side. You can see that in the increased reimbursements that they've given us. And so this supplemental request is basically balanced by those increased revenues. And if that's in question, it also is important to note that what we charge them to maintain their vehicles is far less than what they would be paying if they were to go to shops. And so if there's a savings for them to bring their vehicles to us, we're kind of the ones covering that savings. And so this supplemental request maybe goes back against that a little bit and helps us keep full staff. We do, obviously, in addition to CFD1, we've got all of the sheriff's vehicles, all of the county admin vehicles, all of our public works vehicles, our snow plows and dump trucks and heavy equipment. So we did an analysis on that supplemental request page of number of employees and the number of vehicles that we maintain, and try to show that we are a little bit overloaded.
And so you're
Overloaded. With 58 vehicles per person is our maintenance count right now in terms of mechanics. And that kind of work can get pretty grueling. I mean, during a snow event, we're working all night long, keeping the trucks on the road, and so that's a tough job.
Trey Kelly's working on something there. I had a follow-up question on vehicles. Have there been any vehicles that have switched over to electric, or is that planned to be? And then what would that do to maintenance?
We don't have any electric vehicles. I think we're purchasing or have purchased a hybrid for admin.
Admin's had a hybrid vehicle for several years, and so we're replacing it with another electric vehicle.
And as we look at electric vehicle use for something like the sheriff or public works, the mileage is so incredibly high that those would be a challenge to keep them working. It would also require us to retool and train. And then there's also the question of charging stations, which are very expensive.
Yeah, so there was kind of a follow-up question there. So Commissioner Kelly, go ahead.
Just want to make sure I'm understanding my documents correctly. I'm looking at page 122.
Okay.
And there's a credit in line, it's credited to 201, right? That comes from where?
122.
See, it's in blue, it says 201.
Actually, I can find it.
What number are you looking at?
So,
So that's the ending fund balance that starts the beginning of the Road and Bridge Fund. So that $2,674,949 is the beginning fund balance for 2025. If you go back then on to page
yeah,
116,
yeah, okay. So I think I'm understanding that correctly.
115.
So if I'm calculating all this correctly, Chad, your total increase for the year is 1.5%. of total budget. That includes your supplemental.
I think that's about right.
I think that's about right. And I just wanted to call it out because we get many departments that are asking for significant increases, and appreciate your work on working very carefully at these budgets to try to keep that down. The same is true for our planning department, which I don't have the page handy right away, but it is also extremely,
9.
page 69.
We also have a vacant position in zoning and codes that we're not filling right now because of the downturn in building permits. So we do have capacity to fill it if we need to, but we're not spending those dollars unless we need to.
Zoning is at 5.75 increase, so a little, and that's including those market and merit increases. So I just want to make the point that it is possible for our departments to be really careful with their budgets and make really tough choices, but thank you to both of you for that.
Sarah, can you just give the number one more time about the recommendation from Public Works for a transfer to the CIP?
Yeah, it's our estimation, and these are estimates based off of what we think is going to happen in 2025, that they will end 2025 with a 29% fund balance. They are an operating fund, so if we want to keep them on target at 25%, the difference between what that fund balance is projected to be in this book and what it would need to get down to get to 25% is $413,000. We approached Public Works and said, well, do you need $413,000 in more commodities for 2025? And they said their recommendation would be to move it to CIP, where we could use it on larger projects where I think our cost increases and the cost of labor and construction is probably greater than we're seeing on the commodity side, which is handled by the Road and Bridge budget. So, and literally we had that conversation about 2 days before we got this book printed. So we internally were like, well, if that's something the commission wants us to do to get that fund balance back on target, we can include it in your final budget. So we can talk about that during deliberations if that's direction you want us to take. We're going to just verify with the auditors that it can go straight from CIP from Road and Bridge, or does it have to go back to the general fund? But it would just increase the amount of transfer coming into the CIP fund.
And equipment replacements are coming straight out of Road and Bridge, right? They're not falling under CIP. So
Correct.
Right.
There's a separate account for equipment reserve. You have that detail in your budget book. Road and Bridge, fleet, and our vegetation and fleet all have their own separate equipment reserve accounts. And that's under your summaries, is what those balances are, and then what they're specifically looking to replace in 2024 and 5 is under the Road and Bridge tab.
And we try to be very thoughtful about the equipment replacement plan and look at a piece of equipment. I mean, the day we buy it, we're already thinking, what's the year this gets replaced? And we're putting it in a list that we track that's reflected on page 118, just looking at near-term replacements. And some of those get very expensive, which is why we need to do that.
and I very much appreciate that amount of planning that goes into it. Commissioners, do you have any other questions for these department heads? None for me. All right, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Take a break till the sheriff gets here.
Yeah, we will take that break, and the sheriff is scheduled at 11, but we might be able to get him here sooner. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We have with us the sheriff, and he has brought some of his staff with him. We'll let you introduce yourselves, but actually we're going to start with Katie, who's going to get us started with some overview comments. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. The last, but certainly not least, session of your budget hearings for 2025 is focused on the budget of our Sheriff's Office. A year ago in our budget hearings, I shared with you all the staffing challenges that our sheriff and our local police chiefs were experiencing. Many of our local law enforcement agencies struggled with staff retention and recruitment as neighboring agencies offered pay that was notably higher than that of our own local agencies. Throughout 2023, you all heard from Sheriff Armbruster and Major Bunting about the impact of this pay differential on their ability to staff their agency. And in late 2023, the commission approved a pay plan for our sheriff's office to better address their staffing needs. I would defer to the sheriff and his staff for confirmation, but I believe we've seen a steady increase in staffing for the sheriff's office since the passage of that pay plan. However, in order to achieve that pay plan, new positions were not added to the sheriff's office operations in 2023. And there still remains needs for positions in some of the supportive areas of the agency. Supplemental requests that you have from the sheriff's office include a network administrator and a senior PC specialist to support the growing technology needs of the agency, a civil process clerk, a reentry case manager, a warrants clerk, a coroner scene investigator, and a new position for a reentry clerk. You may recall that the reentry clerk is included in the county administrator's proposed budget, and I'd like to speak to that briefly. Over the last several years, the Sheriff's Office Reentry Services team has continued to expand their caseload, providing services to inmates while they are in custody, developing and providing post-release plans to ensure successful transition back to the community, providing case management and support to reentry clients who are accepted into our specialty courts, including maintaining case management and the provision of medication-assisted treatment in the community, as well as providing case management to clients who receive housing through reentry housing vouchers, among many others. The reentry program maximizes and leverages the existing resources of other county community partners, particularly Artists Helping the Homeless and Heartland RADAC. These efforts maximize the county's investments in these services, but more importantly, helps the reentry staff create a streamlined transition for their clients back to the community when they leave our county jail. Funding the supplemental request for a reentry clerk will allow the case managers, program coordinator, and reentry director to focus more of their time on their core services of providing direct client contacts, effective case management services, and continuing to build the footprint of this team. Before I end, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and appreciate the continued partnership of our Sheriff's Office in our initiatives across the justice system and in our community. As a primary example from my perspective in 2023, you all know our sheriff has long been a champion of the need for an improved process related to competency restoration. In the summer of 2023, Sheriff Armbruster was pivotal in the formation of a work group to develop our local jail-based competency restoration program, which we believe is the first in the state to launch operations within a county jail. Sheriff Armbruster and Major Bunting were key partners throughout the planning of that process, and that program would not be possible without their support. With that, I would turn the session back to you all for introductions, questions, and discussion.
You want to introduce yourself and Under Sheriff?
You bet. Okay, so I'm Jay Armbruster. I'm the sheriff here. I have with me my esteemed colleagues, my Undersheriff Stacy Simmons, the brains of the outfit, and then Monica McKinney, who is head of our budget department. So we're here to basically answer questions. I would add a few little things to Katie. First off, not only did we come to you last year for that pay package that you ultimately granted, but we actually gave up 4 positions in order to fund that. So we are still not quite to that staffing level, even with the missing 4 positions, but this is an opportunity for me to publicly thank you all for funding that, because our applications rose a little over 600% as a result of that package. Our staffing has increased. We were down basically 1/4 of our uniformed staff. We were short 1 shift in the jail and on patrol. We are sneaking up. As you know, we build from the bottom up. So we can't just hire for all positions. We have to hire at the bottom and then push everybody up. And that's the way we've decided to do it that way. And it's worked for us, and we're going to continue that because we want to reward our staff who start at the bottom and work up. But it also is time consuming, and so we're working through that. But the pay package was absolutely 100% what we needed in order to get that moving in the right direction. So 1 year later, I'm back here to say thank you. And I know my staff would say thank you. Now, we're to the point now where we're cutting overtime, and I'm starting to hear grumbles that there's not enough available overtime, which is a nice problem to have. So if I had to choose. Before we get into any of the questions, I know the reentry position has been built in basically into and we're extremely thankful for that, and we can talk all day about the work that reentry does. but I'm going to advocate for 2 more positions. Specifically, there's a warrants and a civil process clerk. I'm going to combine that into one and just ask for an administrative clerk. Basically, that person would be able to handle both of those positions, or at least fill in the gaps. That is my number 1. And then the number 2 would be the IT position. It doesn't have to be I don't remember how the wording is. We asked for an administrator and basically a worker. We just need the worker. And we asked for the IT position last year. We're unable to get that, but we're back again this year. And this year our need has actually changed a little bit in the fact that, as you well know, I think it's 20% of our IT positions are funded and specifically supposed to work for dispatch. So what we've been doing, we've basically been just having certain people do the work, but we feel like dispatch is actually getting shortchanged. And we would like to dedicate one person. I believe we have 5. This would be a 6th person for our IT division, which would basically allow us to dedicate one person specifically to dispatch to cover that 20% of funding that is supposed to be used for dispatch, instead of just trying to do a hodgepodge who can cover it now. So that's the need for that position. But other than that, I stand for questions or comments or whatever you need. So thank you.
All right, we will have some. Let's start with the reentry. So the clerk position is built into the budget currently. How many, so that's to manage case managers.
Sure.
You know, how many case managers or how many people are working in that department already?
We have 5 in there. Is it 4? 4. So we have the director, Carrie Nice, and then she has 3 case managers that work under her. This would basically be an administrative assistant, as you said, who would help manage them to do the day-to-day work so they can actually be doing their work more fully in the community and in our jail. And as you know, the reentry division was built under Sheriff McGovern, and it was specifically designed to help folks who are transitioning out of jail. And just with the way the world has changed, these folks are beginning to work in the community more often than not. And so the workload has increased. The way our justice system has been built with the new courts, the specialty courts and stuff, has just added that much more work for them to do. So this would just be somebody who could work on the backside in the office, taking care of all the day-to-day work, so they don't have to.
And you said Carrie Nice and then 4 case managers
No, it's
under
3,
her?
I'm sorry.
3
It's 4
under her,
total.
okay.
Yeah.
That's on case management, because I'll move to some others. Go ahead.
I'm not sure it's on case management, but so I look at your overall budget, and then I look at the amount of increase, and I also compare it to what our assessed valuation is, right? Sure. And so when I do that for the entire sheriff's budget, it's like a 7.24% increase, and we're at 6.89.
Sure.
So that's not including the supplementals. When we add the supplementals, we're at 9.85, right?
Yep.
So part of my question as I went through your budget and looked was, are you more interested in getting the additional staff, or are there places within your budget that there are opportunities for reduction that would help you get to the staff you need?
Sure.
You know, and I can just throw out a couple. You know, you've got office equipment and furniture for $38,000 here, and your total expenditure over the past couple of years has been like $2,000. That goes a long way to staffing a position if we don't spend it. But I don't know what your need is, and there's a delicate balance between commission funding and elected officials' needs, right? 100%. So do you want to comment on any of that?
Sure. We would absolutely. Let's just be honest. The budget is a bit of a dance, and no elected official, especially, is going to offer up to give money back. However, we are the largest funded budget under the county umbrella. We have a lot of money. That's all there is to it. It costs a lot of money. If there are places that we can identify that we can cut, we absolutely are more than willing to do that, especially when it comes to staffing needs, because we are able to do things and buy stuff because we have that money, but we need staff. So therefore, when it comes down to it, absolutely. Especially when you talk, like, especially office furniture, I don't even know why that was built in that way. And And my
Stacy
undersheriff
might
is
know
telling,
why
is
it's
telling me
filtered that way.
that I need to be quiet and let her speak.
And it was in the narrative. There
Yes,
were some things
absolutely.
in the narrative.
So yes, so ultimately, the answer to your question is yes. We know, and we also know that there are some funding streams within our budget that are currently there, specifically the KDAD's money that we don't, and I hope that you all agree, is that we don't feel like that money will continue past in the next few years as the state administrations change. So we're hesitant to count on that money as part of our budget, but it's also, it looks like a windfall really for the time being. So how will we manage that money has been kind of unique, but yes, absolutely. So Stacy, did you have something to add?
Right, there's two sections that we asked for furniture, one for the correction side, one for the operation side. The correction side is a new table for the conference room. We have a polygraph guy who comes in, and that has completely scratched up the table and put huge divots in it every time he comes, like once a week. And so that's why we were asking for that. And then the furniture for the sheriff's operations side, since there wasn't going to be any additions done to the sheriff's side for the new LEC expansion, we were going to ask for a new updated boardroom with electronics and some furniture, since we're going to be there for a while. So, but those were the reasons we were asking for those.
And would that be better rolled into the cost of remodel, if that is indeed a conversation we want to have, or maybe more so than out of general fund?
Yeah,
I'm
that's
trying to keep that budget down.
Yeah,
So,
my understanding
and
is-
that's a part of the
Right.
building that's not going to get renovated.
we're not getting any renovation for the sheriff's office on
But again,
the operation side.
I would also say that in speaking about that KDAD's money specifically, we have basically a savings account sitting here where we could spend money for equipment like that. My intention has been is to turn that money back in, because any KDAD's money that comes in is for work we've done that you've already funded. So therefore, it should technically go back to the county. But I also want to make it clear that any money that sits in that account, if we have an expenditure that we need that we can save from coming out of the budget, we can use that money for in a one-time. That's something. So I guess if we wanted to drop that line item from 38 down to 8, but then fund the rebuilding of our boardroom or our conference room through that KDAD's money, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's the kind of thing that I think that we can all agree is the way to handle it, but while also getting the budget number down.
Can you point to me where the KDAD's revenue line might
I
be?
believe it comes in on state reimbursement line. I can get you a number here. On the yes, our corrections side.
Towards the top.
Yep. So we get paid quarterly. We submit reports for people who we hold, who are waiting a bed at Larned or Osawatomie, and the state reimburses us $100 a day. We just got a quarterly payment here within the last few weeks, and it was somewhere north of $90,000. So that money just comes in through the state reimbursement line and then basically sits there. But like I said, I personally believe the political landscape in the state of Kansas will change over the next few years, and that money will go away.
And when you say that money sits there, and then is that then returned to the general fund at the end of the fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay, so not just
Yeah.
sitting there and.
No, it's not just sitting there. That's correct. My intention is to either buy one-time things that we could save budget money. Instead of spending budget money, we can spend that money. But my intention is always from this point to return it at the end of the year. And as you well know, we turned in a lot of money last year. I think it was 1.9.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want to be cautious.
Sure.
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
but see, that goes to the mill levy
Right.
and is ongoing. So as we have these conversations about things that are one-time costs, we want to apply that to our fund balance and get our fund balance aligned with our policies, right? And so my question, and this may be to you all, it may be to Sarah, and it probably is mostly to the commission and something we'll have to talk to during deliberations is it better to set your budget at a number and let you figure out whether you need a conference table or a clerk and make those changes, especially knowing that you're going to get different KDAD's reimbursements and you know more better than we do where to set those, and that might help you
Yeah.
sort of set those things rather than, there's a lot of mill levy ad here, right, which is ongoing.
Sure.
So just something for us all to think about. Sarah,
Yeah.
Jay, anybody? Yeah.
I mean, I get nervous when we talk about commodities and equipment, like tables, and substituting that for staffing. So to me, I would rather us reduce an ongoing expense, an ongoing budget line, and say we're going to try to do our best to live inside that and then turn that into a position, than I would necessarily, like, if they cut their furniture line, they're going to cut it ongoing. And so that's what but we certainly could sit down and work with the sheriff's office with that and talk through it and try to identify. There are some places where we could do that.
Yeah.
To identify that. And they are in the general fund. So if we had, I know that there are some things that we're cautious about, like the medical care contract is up for renewal. We anticipate there will be some pretty substantial cost increases with that. But we can adjust because they are inside the general fund, and there's lots of room in there to sort of accommodate if you were over a particular budget line by 2% or 3%. So I think we could do all those things and still keep and not add to mill levy, if that's what commissioners are asking us to do.
I think it's also a good point with especially the jail contractuals. Our medical specifically has increased a lot over the last 2 to 3 years, and we anticipate it to increase even a little bit more, especially as we're currently going out for bid for a new contractor. But when it comes to that KDAD's money, I will go back to is that all I ask is that commissioners and future commissioners understand that we can work that on a year-to-year basis. I just don't want people to think, oh, you've got 250 coming in, let's just build that into your budget, and then 5 years, a new governor comes in and that money is zero. So I'm here to work, and I definitely want to get I want you to be able to do what you do for the mill levy, whether that mean cut or hold flat. And if there's something that the sheriff's office can do to help you do that, then we are absolutely on board.
And we lowered the estimate for that revenue source for those reimbursements from KDADS to 40,000 for 2025 in reflection for the fact that we think it's going to go down.
Right.
And so that means the sheriff's office isn't dependent on that, $100,000, only dependent on 40,000 of that revenue right now. And then, each year we're going to look at it and adjust it depending on what we get in. I do agree with the sheriff. I think that 2023 number is an outlier, and we should not plan around that number.
2023 allowed us to go back for a year prior, so we got a lump sum check for the year that we had already worked, and then we began that. So yeah, that is 100% an outlier, but I would say that any numbers past that, it was July of whatever last year, any of those quarterly numbers as they come in, those are probably closer to what they'll be. And again, competency restoration is something that we're working on, but it's also not, we're not going to get to a zero. And I want to hold our expectations. If we have 9 people on the waiting list, my hope is that we can get 1 to 2 persons off of that list, because the way that we are going to have to operate when it comes to competency restoration is we're going to have to take the low-hanging fruit. And I don't mean to speak about human beings as low-hanging fruit, but we're going to have to be very selective in the ones that we can do within our jail. And there will still always be a need for us to send folks to the Larned State Hospital or whatever hospital to get that care and treatment that we just simply won't be able to do through our program. But we are trying to cut that number, so.
You anticipated my question.
Okay, good.
So thank you for answering that. Moving to the IT, and I know we have county IT that also supports the sheriff's office, and you have your own IT for reasons of privacy and keeping
Security.
data separate. Can you talk about how they interact? What's provided to you from county resources at IT, and what is separate, and so why that increased need here?
Sure. Well, so what we do is we actually have a standalone. Our IT is siloed, so to speak. We do have some crossover when it comes to needing some access to the county webpage for employees and for administrative staff to be able to get into documents and stuff that are held on. But we have our own webpage, we have our own websites, we have our own servers, we have all our own staff. And that is simply because of the need to have our security requirements, federal and state requirements are unlike any other. And so we have to keep that dedicated. So when I say that we are in need of another person, we just simply need another person that is going to work within our silo. Is there anything else that you need to add to that?
Yeah, so over the last 3 years, well, over the last several years, but mainly over the last 3 years, our vehicles have grown. So we have like 13 patrol vehicles, went to 30. And so with that comes, you know, all of the new camera systems and the body worn cameras and the new equipment that's in the cars. And so they're doing those things in addition to the new O365 and all of the security upgrades and all of those things. And they're just behind. They're always essentially, we're not looking forward to what we're supposed to be looking forward to for the security of the sheriff's office and the criminal history information that we're holding. We're literally just taking the problems that are coming before us.
Or a stiff defense?
Yeah, and what's happening now is after having a conversation with Tony Foster of Dispatch, he has not been getting the services that he's been paying for. He's actually paying for a 1.2 person to be IT, and he's getting maybe a quarter of a person. So we've made that change that he's now getting what he is, what the expectations are, which then puts us even further behind. So that's why we essentially asked for 2 IT persons, one to be able to help build IT and keep them moving forward with all the technology they now have, and then, you know, essentially another one for the sheriff's office to do what we have. And so I know the sheriff is definitely asking for the 1. It would be great to have the 2 just to be able to do the things that we need to do with security and just the troubleshooting. You know, our IT director is the one that's out there in cars working on help desk tickets and things like that when he should be running the department. So it just keeps growing, and our staff is just limited on what we can do.
Did that get to your answer?
And I have a follow-up, a couple
Okay.
of follow-ups. One of them would be, if ECC isn't getting what they paid for, they don't actually pay for anything we do.
Right,
So
right,
we were
right.
not getting what we paid for, so
Yes,
just.
Right.
you're absolutely
We're
right.
not-
Not- Yeah, right.
They're not getting the services they deserve. and You
Right.
guys aren't getting what you paid for.
Right.
Following up on and we probably will come back to a little bit with the IT, but what you mentioned of going from 15 to 30 vehicles in a short period of time, let's pull on that thread. Tell me more about that.
So we've moved from, so with the way, years and years ago, we went to a 12-hour shift schedule to utilize our manpower. That's a terrible word. Utilize our staffing, but more efficiently. And as we did that, we were beginning to put extreme amount of miles on cars. Cars were being run 24/7, 365. And plus, I'll just tell you this, when somebody has their own car, they take much better care of it. And so we were constantly fighting that. So what we did was 10, 15 years ago, we began trying to move towards having the patrol deputies having their own take-home car. We inherited that program. We have continued on with it. We're actually reaching the point where we're about where we're done. But that has created costs through many different things, not just the cost of the vehicle, but just the way that vehicles are being provided to us nowadays. 5, 8 years ago, cars were $27,000. We could buy a Dodge Durango for 22. I remember one time before I came into office. Now they're 48, 50. So the cost of the vehicles has increased. The automakers love to change their body styles, just like using the Durango specifically. They're switching the Durango over to the Grand Wagoneer platform. So that's, of course, going to increase the cost, but also that's going to make our cages and our push bumpers, all of our equipment that goes into a Dodge Durango obsolete. And so now you have to repurchase all of that stuff. And it's just like phone companies changing the charger cord. They just want you to keep buying them. And so that has been an increased cost on top of the fact that we have been trying to purchase new vehicles. So it is expensive. It looks expensive. I really don't have a defense for it, but we are trying to get to a point where we have a fleet of vehicles that are assigned to people who will take care of them, so we will get more years out of them. And I'll just tell you this, it used to be a patrol car would get switched out every other year. We'd put about 45,000 miles on a car a year, and then it would get switched out right around 100,000. Right now, we're putting about 20,000 miles on a car a year, so we're getting 4 and 5 years out of a car. There's just more cars now, so that it's kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen the other when it comes to that.
Kind of the catalyst that pushed us to do this quicker was when we had the tornado. We only had a very limited amount of cars, and so we had to call agencies and immediately ask for assistance. We probably had 10 or 12 different agencies coming, just blocking streets and those kinds of things. We had the personnel, we just didn't have cars to put them in.
And they couldn't get to them.
Yeah, we couldn't get to the homes to check, the damages for the people that were trapped in there, those kinds of things, just to go door to door. Like I said, so we had the people, we just didn't have the vehicles. And we can't expect other agencies to give, staff for days on end, so.
Especially in that instance where that covered 2.5 counties, they're dealing with their own trouble. They can't be coming to help us.
And I always want to make sure that we're also willing to think outside of the box for solving problems like that, especially problems that can be solved with a lot of dollars, or like, what's the other option? So like the CERT teams were never stood up during the tornado, and they are specifically designed to go door to door within their own neighborhoods, and they were already there, but they never were. And that's not that comes from SO, but it's just a piece of the puzzle that we've been building this piece. We didn't use it.
Sure.
Why? And they're like practically free. So.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify about the IT position. Stacy, I heard you say you really want both. Duly noted. Jay, which one did you, was it the PC specialist
senior
instead of the network administrator
Yeah.
that you would prioritize? Okay, just want to make sure I have that straight. Thank you.
And I'll just say this, that it's simply because it's the cheaper of the two positions, and I feel like I have a better chance of talking you into it. I mean, I'm supposed to be transparent, so I'm being
Just to say
transparent.
that out loud.
Since we're starting to prioritize things, do you agree that the reentry clerk is the highest need that you have?
Well, yes, it's hard for me. To me, the three are A1As, but yes, I believe that reentry has been operating at a level that they cannot maintain, but it's also been at an elite level, and so therefore we're putting a lot of their expectations are very high, and if they slip at all, it's going to make it look like they're not doing their job, but they're actually doing fantastic work. So therefore, I think that that position is the number one to just help shore that up, to keep them operating where they're at. But then the one little b would be the other two positions I talked about.
Being the clerk?
Office clerk, which would cover, because like I said, we had asked for a warrants clerk and a civil process, but we would be willing to combine that into one person. So one clerk, and then the IT position.
That would actually just me.
Yeah, I'm like, what? I thought I was getting a signal again.
I will say that there are certain things that have come about over the last year or so with the new Odyssey system and different mandates, unfunded mandates, like everything is unfunded, that have come down, that have put the pressure on our civil process clerks. They're now required to e-file. And also, we've added judges. And so with that comes additional PFAs, protection from abuse orders, protection from stalking orders, and that is a main focus, really, of what they're doing up there. And those have just exploded over the last few years in numbers. And so the work that takes, we're behind. We're literally behind. We do the upfront work, but then they have certain statutory requirements to go back and check those when Kansas sends them essentially an audit, that they have to go back in and look at whether that information is still up to date, whether that information is still correct, and we're behind on those. We're always behind, and so those are some statutory requirements that we're required.
And to clarify, we're not behind on serving
Right, sorry, I shouldn't
PFAs.
say that. That's-
As soon as a restraining order comes in, it becomes the priority, and everything else gets put to the side. And that's where things have begun to lag, because I honestly believe there should be a study done as to what is going on in our community, that our PFA and PFSs have increased exponentially over the last year to two, to where we're getting 5 to 10 a day, as it used to be 5 to 10 a month. So something is happening. And so I'd be curious what that is, but all I know is that it's increased our workload.
And some of that work that the clerk's office used to do is now, has moved to the sheriff's office
Right.
as far as e-filing. And so that is taking a tremendous amount of time. And so,
A lot of them are staying overtime.
right,
and
they're
maybe
staying
even
over
paying overtime.
just to get the PFS and PFAs into the system so that they can be served by law enforcement. So some of those things, that's the reason why the clerk's office right now is so important to us.
This is Commissioner Reed. I just want to jump in here and say, I really appreciated reading that narrative because it honestly filled in some missing information for me in my other job. I did not realize that direction had come from OJA. So there's been a lot of confusion about changes in process between the clerk's office and whose responsibility and duty is what when it comes to the entering into NCIC and all those things that you're describing beyond service of the order. So it's helpful for me. Thank you. With both my hats on. And I mean, I would say, I also appreciate your note that I think there's something to be said for trying to understand why there is such an increase in those particular types of civil orders. I don't know that it correlates at all to the increase in judges. I think there are a lot of other changes in effect that have just applied pressure, and but we can unpack that some other day. What I thought was frustrating, and I laid out in the fact that it is another unfunded mandate from the state and a change that happened from a state department, in this instance, the Office of Judicial Administration, reducing the work of their clerk's offices, which are staffed pretty well when it comes to state court departments, in my experience, and anecdotally between counties. And so that's just a really interesting tension to have understanding around. And it's frustrating that has to, come to the county commission to backfill. It's another example, and we've had a number of these situations with the sheriff's department in particular, right? It was 2 years ago that we were talking about Kansas Highway Patrol and the need for more patrol officers related to their reduction in service to Douglas County. And so I just, there's not a question in there. I just wanted to say some of those things. And it is such an important and obviously statutorily required and specific function of the sheriff's office that it is a priority function, and that there are very real implications for the lag time that has been created by the change in this process that I recognize you all had no choice in and are left to figure out. I am curious with the, on the other side of that administrative processing arm of the sheriff's office, there's a little bit of narrative about the warrants division and how, those numbers have just continuously increased. Maybe that is something that's more directly correlated to more judges. And it also seems naturally more cases being filed in our county would naturally lead to more warrants. Do you have any other insight to offer us about some of the implications of not being able to stay on top of those warrants? So Jay, you mentioned a moment ago that like when a protection order is filed, that's priority, and which means warrants, I assume, are part of that list that's sort of being constantly triaged, right? And then within the warrants list, there's more prioritization and triaging of which to serve and which not to. Can you just help us understand, I guess, how I'm sorry that I'm wandering here. I'm trying to get back to what my core question is. Are there any other pressure points and things that you think have really driven that sharp increase in more warrants? And what are the implications of not being able to stay on top of that?
Yeah, I have no numbers to back this up, so that I'm speaking anecdotally and just from my perspective. But when COVID came along and we jettisoned 100 people roughly out of our jail, we've managed to keep that number down. The courts have done their part in not refilling the jail by offering more recognizance bonds, offering more pretrial release, more monitoring. Those, and I support that. Let me make that clear. I don't want to change this. But with that, I believe an unintended consequence was we had people who would have been in custody for the duration of their case now being out. And the likelihood of them not coming to court or not doing what it is they're supposed to be doing on probation could be increased. And therefore, I think that we've had an increase of warrants just simply for people who would have been in custody who are no longer, but then they also chose not to go to court. So therefore, they get a failure to appear. But with that said, that number could only be a few, at best, 4 or 5 a day. But in the grand scheme, not enough to explain the amount of increase in warrants. I think the other part is, as you mentioned, is that as we have more judges and the wheels of justice begin to move less slowly, we're processing more cases. Therefore, we're getting more summonses, or we're getting more first-time warrants on new charges that somebody maybe doesn't even know that exist. So they're processing more cases. I think those are two things, but again, that is completely anecdotal from my perspective. But you're absolutely right in that we triage warrants, and some days we get none. There are a few days where we have no new warrants come out through district court, but some days we get 25. And our warrant people look at the names, look at the cases, and they look in like, which ones do we have to get picked up right now? And those are the ones they concentrate, and the others just simply go on the shelf to wait for a time that person is contacted through some other unintended means. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Can you illustrate for us how many staff you have that currently go out and do civil process and warrant service, and the difference between those who go out in the field and the administrator, the clerks who are managing?
Absolutely. The warrants division, in 2003, I took a special assignment to go in and serve warrants. I was the warrants division, and I was the one person who did it. I did that for about a year. 2024, as we stand, we have one. We still have one person doing it. This is something we have talked about for decades, is that we have got to get a second person there. But again, speaking of triage, we need people in the jail. We need people on patrol. This is another one. So when I say that we have one serving warrants, that is true. But I also know that our deputies daily get the list of new warrants, and they go through it themselves. And in their downtime, when they're not on calls for services, they go and try to serve warrants as well. So I would just go ahead and say we have about 1.5 persons doing it today, each day. As far as civil process goes, we have 2 full-time and no part-time, right? No, 2 full-time. So in those 2 folks, they are certified deputies. They're also, they're both retired from other law enforcement agencies who've come to work for us to basically serve. So they go around and they try to serve, they get their PFAs done for the day or whatever they can do, and then they move on to the others. But our patrol staff serves, I would say, 60%, 70% of our PFAs, because they're very difficult to serve, because typically the people don't want to be served. And our patrol staff simply has the ability to be there at odd hours to catch them. So those 2 deputies basically do what they can on PFAs, but they try to get the bulk of the writs and the till taps and the evictions. Good heavens, those take a long time, and there's a lot of that going on. So they tend to focus on that. So I hope that answers your question. And we need increases in staffing in those departments, no doubt about it. But again, you used a great word, triage. We're trying to plug holes where our needs are the greatest.
Just to kind of give a little context, right now we have a lot of part-time staff filling in positions that for the last several years, that was okay. That was, we had empty positions, so that money that we were paying our part-time staff, we were never over budget for staffing. As we continue to hire staffing, at some point, we're hoping that we're going to be full. And then we're going to have all these part-time staff that are helping with these positions that we're going to have to figure out how to fund or not fund them. And so we had somebody working part-time with us in warrants. She is no longer there. So it's getting further and further behind administratively. We do have somebody right now working part-time, helping to fill 10 hours in that position, and then 10 hours, well, 10 and 9 for the civil process. And it's still not enough. So that's where the full-time position comes in, and we'll probably still keep that part-time position to do additional work, but at some point, these part-time people that have been helping keep the sheriff's office moving forward, we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do with these folks. So just give you some.
I do want to add, like, we work closely with the sheriff's office. If they need to change a position,
Right.
reclassify it, use it differently, we do that throughout the year. We don't wait and save those things up for budget.
Yeah, it's been very nice because we've had some retirements or some positions that just became vacant that we realized were archaic or just not needed. And so we'll just reclassify them into something else. So we've been that's been a big, big help for us over the last many years.
I think you're right that conversation about why have those PFA, PFSs increased so drastically might be something that CJCC wants to kind of look holistically at the justice system. It also might be something that is outside of the justice system, just happening culturally in our society.
Sure.
It would be very curious to know.
And if we could identify something upstream, that would be a huge help for us because if we can lower that number, good heavens, that would be helpful because. Like I said, a PFA comes through and it becomes the last thing the sheriff's office, the last thing I want is somebody to get hurt when we're trying to, or just didn't serve or couldn't serve. And so we work very hard to the point where the patrol actually complains that they have to serve so many of them, but we are not going to not serve them. So it just, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot of times when it comes to that. But PFAs, there's a bunch of them and we've prioritized them at the top. So it just makes a lot of work.
Another question related to reentry. We don't yet have the funding secured from the feds for the Veterans Court, but that's another possibility, and that wouldn't be funded through Douglas County. It'd be funded through the VA. Would that then be an increased need for reentry because we have a new specialty court, or would it be a funded piece that would come with it? Do you know if that kind of reentry would be funded as part of a Veterans Court?
Probably, yeah, go ahead.
I do not think that the case management that reentry currently provides to our other specialty courts is part of that earmarked funding for veterans courts that we anticipate coming to the county. I think the case management component where we see our CJS staff providing to, or the case coordination, I think that is a position that will be part of that. But beyond, we have very robust specialty court teams here, and I don't know that I would say I would not count on that being part of that funding block that would be funneled to
I'm
us.
not sure we're going to have the need either.
Okay.
Yes, I would probably suggest we put a pin in that until that program starts, and when we know too what the actual funding would be and the actual usage, and the caseload of that would be.
Yeah, I
We
didn't
just
expect.
started a year or so ago, actually as part of our booking process, finding out who is current former veterans as well, just so we would have an idea, a snapshot of what the population even within our jail is. I have not looked at those numbers, so I'm not even going to sit here and tell you what they look like, but we will have a better idea once that comes along as to even what our involvement might be.
And I didn't expect that we would have that be a known at the moment, just
Yeah,
curious to see
sure.
that it's on people's minds as far as which direction will that take our reentry, like more of it that's funded or more that's needed.
Yep.
There's other questions?
My question is like probably more for Sarah, for staff about this. I'm just curious if reentry case management positions could be funded through behavioral health sales tax. I've been pondering that idea along with other things. You know, we talked the other day about some of the specialty court programs that are funded through criminal justice services and perhaps could be a good fit. Reentry is another one that I'm just curious about.
There's a couple things there. One, I'd like to have Katie, we've talked about this fall. I think I'd like to bring the reentry team and have a larger conversation about just how they work with probation, parole, and court services and community or criminal justice services. Like, let's just do kind of a 101 on some of that stuff, and then how it supports specialty courts. I know the reentry team has been supporting particularly medicated assisted treatment with specialty courts, with drug court. That would be something that to me is eligible. So like if we had some numbers so that we feel like we could support like how many of those folks are behavioral health or substance abuse, that we could then do that. I think that is something we could look into moving forward. I do think there are projects like drug court and behavioral health court that are currently supported by general fund mill levy dollars that could also be moved to the behavioral health fund and without additional transfer of funds moving in. So that'd be a way to free up some mill levy for some of those things too. I think we might have to just dig deeper into it because I think there are probably programs in criminal justice services that could go over there too. And we'd probably want to take a holistic look at that conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sarah, and I do. I had intentions of making myself a quick list of all the, and I will by the time we get to our deliberations as a commission, all the different spaces where I just have a question mark about whether or not that could be a smart move for us.
There's other questions for Sheriff, Under Sheriff, and team?
Did we win?
I'm sorry?
Did we win?
Stay tuned.
That is,
Stay
sure?
tuned for
Are you
3
sure?
more days.
There's a set of circumstances where I can feel like a winner. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think we round this out for you today. So
very
thank you
much.
very much for your service, and thanks for taking your time.
And thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Just want to remind the public that might be listening that we discussed yesterday that we're going to not start deliberations tomorrow. Commissioners are going to take Thursday to review their notes and their information, and then we will plan to start deliberations on Friday morning here in this building. We will be on Zoom for deliberations, and we'll start that on Friday morning at 9.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for Sarah or the budget staff before we adjourn?
We are going to look at some of our notes this afternoon from what over the last 3 days and begin to compile information that we have already that's requested. I would just certainly, if there's other things you definitely want for review and for for your deliberations, if you could let us know now.
I mean, we mentioned mental health court and drug court as being possible. Are there other, I'd be interested to hear from administration if there are other things that you think that are in our county budget that we haven't considered pulling out for mental health.
We can dig a little deeper on that
Okay.
and get that to you.
Yeah, I had that on my list to see if administrative staff would come back with just a list of services that are a possibility for that move. And also if there's some thoughts, and we may bring some thoughts back in each individually about some fund potentials within county departments that could be freed up for mill levy.
Okay.
Yeah, some cuts there.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to have those as soon as possible because I'll need time to research that piece.
With that, I believe if we have nothing else from commissioners, we are recessed until Friday morning at 9.
Till 5:30.
Sorry. I was thinking budget-wise, but yes, we will have our 5:30 business meeting this evening. So thank you all for being here.